In today's video, I want to share with you two methods that you can use to find undervalued products to be able to resell on eBay and Amazon. So if you don't know who I am, I've been reselling products online for over 10 years. I actually started flipping bikes on Craigslist, and then I ran a full-time eBay business, and now I'm primarily Amazon FBA. I do sell a couple items on eBay, but in the last year alone, I've sold over 8,000 products for over $760,000 on Amazon. Now, most of the items that I source to resell in my business, I buy from eBay and resell on Amazon FBA. But in today's video, I wanted to talk to the person who's maybe only going to library sales or thrift stores and garage sales, and maybe you're running into a lot of competition, or maybe you're like me and you love going on like little adventures. Like sometimes I'll just drive across the state in Connecticut and hit a bunch of thrift stores. But I want to share with you two methods that you can hit that a lot of resellers aren't going to, that you can score some jackpots, going to. Like you can hit some really big home runs. Now, these methods aren't going to get you rich. You're not going to find like a ton of items at these locations. But again, if you're on a thrift trip and you're going across the state, or you're traveling and you're hitting a bunch of thrift stores, you should add these two methods in. So method number one, pawn shops. Believe it or not, pawn shops can make you a lot of money, especially if you're selling items like DVDs, CDs, electronics, or even video games. You'll find a lot of video games there. Now, keep in mind, if you're going to deal with video games, a lot of times they are priced really high, so it's tough to get an amazing deal if you don't like buy a bunch of stuff. And that's the great thing about going to a pawn shop. You can buy 6, 7, 8 items, and if you're spending $200, $300, $400, you can negotiate with them, which is fantastic. Matter of fact, where was I? I was in Newport Beach. This was about a year ago, and I went out to have breakfast with my girlfriend, and guess what? There was a pawn shop right next to the place we were going to breakfast, and I looked at my girlfriend, she looked at me, and she already knew we're not going into breakfast right now. We're hitting the pawn shop. And I ended up buying a bunch of tools, electronics, DVDs, and I spent quite a bit of money and ended up saving about 50% on the retail price. Now, it depends on the location. It depends, if the pawn shop's suffering, depends if those items have been sitting for a while. If so, or if you spend a lot of money, and depending on who's working there, you can score some crazy deals. And one of the cool things about pawn shops as well is if you're a CD or DVD seller, especially DVDs, some of these pawn shops, they offer ridiculous deals. And I was talking about this on a coaching call with Mike, the used book guy, recently inside of our Reselling Freedom membership. That's a membership that I run where I'm a part of 12 other coaches, and we teach people how to sell on Amazon. We do live calls every single week. We have a course. There's workshops and everything. If you want to check that out, go to resellingfreedom.com. It's about $1 a day, and it's an incredible resource. But we were talking, and Mike even said he started going to pawn shops this year, and some of his pawn shops will do 10 DVDs. I think 10 DVDs for $10, so it's about $1 per DVD. I've gone into pawn shops before where it was 10 cents a DVD because they had so many, nobody was buying them. I love looking for new sealed DVDs. You could certainly go in there, set up your trigger sets with Scout IQ or Scoutly, and scan all the used, but I love going after new DVDs at pawn shops. Electronics, tools, video games, again, could be hit or miss. It depends if you spend a lot of money. Like I said, tools as well. I ended up buying a bunch of like drill bits and different items when I was in Newport. Definitely hit up your pawn shops. I don't go all the time, but I'll hit them up once a month, once a quarter, just roll through, and you could build relationships with the people working at the pawn shops and score some killer deals. Again, it's not something that, I'm going to do every single day, but if I'm going on a trip, or I'm in the area, or I'm hitting up a diner with my girlfriend and see a pawn shop, she already knows I'm going into that pawn shop. Method number two. Now, let's say this one's a little bit inferior to pawn shops. You're going to find much less inventory. Quite often it's hit or miss, but it only takes 2 minutes. Consignment stores. Most resellers think that consignment stores are only going to sell clothing, and most of them do, but there's typically 1% of the inventory there that's going to be either DVDs, they'll have a bookshelf, sometimes they'll have CDs, and I've killed it with board games over there. And when I say killed it, like I've gone in there and I've spent, $15 on a board game that was selling for $100. I've spent $25 on a Lego set that was selling for $150. Resellers aren't going in there looking for those items. So, if there's a consignment store in your area, just pop on in. you know, have your scanner ready, scan some of the books, scan the board games, and some of them don't have any inventory that, you know, you would want, you and I would want. If you're a clothing seller or you're an eBay seller, there's certainly opportunities there, although the prices are going to be high like pawn shops. But if you've been in this game for a while, you know that a lot of these really valuable items, they kind of slip through the cracks, right? And you could pick up those opportunities and resell them on eBay and especially Amazon FBA. So if you're in an area or you're on a trip and you see a consignment store, you see a pawn shop, walk in, check it out. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is you spend 5 or 10 minutes in there and you realize, you know, maybe there's not anything that you want. But go into the pawn shops and negotiate. You're not really going to be able to negotiate at the consignment stores, but at the pawn shops, if you find 20, 30 items, and if you spend money, like if you've got cash on you, especially cash, you can negotiate some killer deals. You know, I remember back in 2016, I traveled the whole country, and for anyone who's been following me for years, I actually put out a guide. I don't sell it anymore because it's quite a bit outdated, even though the guide still applies. It was called Pawn Shop Profits. I made an ebook about this, sharing how you can make money going to pawn shops, and it still applies. The big difference I would say nowadays is back in 2015 and 16, there was like no restrictions. There was no gating. So I was buying and selling any item in there. Like it was jackpot city. If you go back to my YouTube channel and look at my cross-country trip where I went, you know, from Connecticut all the way down to Florida, went through New Mexico, hit up California, shot through the middle of the country. I mean, I must have hit hundreds of pawn shops, and it was extremely lucrative. And yeah, I mean, pawn shops are still very, very profitable. Again, there's just a lot more gatings and restrictions on Amazon, so it makes it a bit more challenging. But if you're a bookseller, look at the consignment stores. If you're selling DVDs, CDs, video games, and you got money to spend and you know what you're doing, hit up those pawn shops. So with that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like the video, comment, subscribe, and I got a lot more content coming. With that being said, much love, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.